Welcome back, everyone. Today, we delve into a poignant chapter of history that not only shaped the past, but continues to reverberate in our present. Welcome to the line that made us, dividing India. Let's begin by picturing India in the late 1940s. The world was recovering from World War II, and the nation of India had fought valiantly alongside the British to remove the Nazi war machine and their East Asian allies from power. It was a great change and independence for the Indian people, and after 200 years of British colonial rule and resource exploitation was now near. However, the British, alongside representatives from India, had other ideas, and had decided to make new plans and redraw the borders of India to create a new nation and partition the nation before they gave up rule. In July of 1947, the Indian Independence Act 1947 of Parliament stipulated that British rule in India would come to an end just 1 month later in August of that year. The Act also stipulated the partition of the presidencies and provinces of British India into new sovereign dominions, India and Pakistan. New Indian borders were suddenly and hastily redrawn by a team of so-called experts in the UK, and millions of people found themselves displaced, persecuted, and even murdered due to something as simple as a line on a map. Politicians and leaders from India and Britain sat around a table with a map of India for hours, drawing and redrawing the line, each of them architects of the lines that eventually divided a nation and covered it in blood. The final line would be named the Radcliffe Line, after Sir Cyril Radcliffe was added to the mix as head of the Boundary Commission. Quite astoundingly, Radcliffe had a lack of prior knowledge about India, was unfamiliar with local conditions, and often relied on information from British officers for his judgment. Did we mention that he was only given 5 weeks to draw this line and divide a country? Rather naively, Radcliffe also used religious composition to decide his boundaries, something that would later lead to many challenges and controversies, especially in and around the Punjab and Bengal areas, where many divided groups felt they had a legitimate claim to the lands there. The final line was announced on August 17, 1947, and almost immediately led to cultural clashes, mass migrations and violence. So why draw the line? The lines were drawn amidst rising tensions between different religious and cultural groups in India. Some believed in the necessity of separate nations for protection, whilst others lamented the division of a land with centuries of diverse history. Not surprisingly, though, the arbitrary drawing of borders led to anger and resentment amongst many, and its hasty implementation resulted in the division of many communities and families. Okay, so let's take it back a little. If the British were leaving anyway, why were they still involved in the partition and the line? Colonial legacy. The British ruled over India for almost 2 centuries. Post-World War II dynamics. European colonial powers, including the British, were seriously weakened both economically and militarily after World War II. Indian nationalist movement. Growing demand for independence led by leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. Partition proposals. Demand for a separate state for Muslims gained momentum. Communal tensions. Escalating tensions between Hindus and Muslims. Minimizing violence. Belief that partition could prevent further communal violence. Political expediency. The British saw partition as a pragmatic solution. Geostrategic considerations. Concerns about maintaining influence and strategic interests. So, how did the British hope to benefit? Well, maintaining influence in the region would be strategically important post-independence, and a swift withdrawal would help to avoid post-colonial chaos, or so they had hoped. The British also hoped that the divide would bring opportunities for new economic ties in the region and strategically important ties with Pakistan as part of their post-colonial strategy. The opinions of Indian people regarding the drawing of the Radcliffe Line and the subsequent partition of India were diverse and complex. Religious and ethnic minorities felt vulnerable and unsure about their future, faced with the dilemma of migrating or staying in their ancestral lands. Widespread violence accompanied the partition from the early days, and a trauma and loss was experienced by many. Despite separation, some longed for the unity that characterized India, but bitterness and mistrust shaped diplomatic relations then as they do today. Overall, the repercussions were deeply emotional, shaping the collective memory of the region. The mass migration and displacement of people following the drawing of the Radcliffe Line during the partition of India in 1947 is one of the most tragic and significant consequences of that period. It triggered a colossal movement of people, with estimates of 10 to 15 million displaced. Extreme communal violence marked the migration, especially along the newly drawn borders. They became scenes of chaos, with trains being attacked and massacres occurring. Trains would later become the sites of some unspeakable violence. Families were torn apart as members moved in different directions, and there was a staggering loss of life at this time. With estimates of hundreds of thousands, there was a massive humanitarian crisis with refugees facing displacement, starvation, and disease. The decision to uproot and leave their homes during the partition was driven by a complex interplay of factors. First off, despite the British thinking it wouldn't matter, the biggest factor in the mass migration was, without a doubt, religion. People wanted to be with those who shared their values and beliefs, or face being isolated from a community who would not accept them. Sadly, the decision to split the lines based upon religion undoubtedly led to instability. Widespread communal violence compelled many to leave in search of safety, and there was fear and insecurity amongst many. There were also forceful evictions, and many people had no choice after being evicted from their homes. All this disruption would eventually lead to a loss of trust between communities, and sometimes even the division of families along religious lines. Okay, so things are going to get a little tense now. So hold on to your seats as we dive into the dark side and touch on some of the darkest massacres that took place during the partition of India in 1947. Amritsar Massacre. Intense violence in the streets, homes, and places of worship. Rawalpindi Massacre. Large-scale violence on the border between Punjab and Pakistan. Hyderabad Massacres. The mass killings of Hyderabadi Muslims that took place in the aftermath of the Indian annexation of Hyderabad. Okay, let's fast forward again. The scars left by the partition ran deep, affecting the very fabric of society. Communities that had coexisted for centuries found themselves divided and, in some cases, in direct conflict. The mistrust sown during those times lingered, impacting inter-community relations for generations. Many carried the weight of nostalgia for a land they could no longer call home. The economic disruptions caused by the partition reverberated for many years. Businesses were disrupted, and the displacement of skilled labor created challenges for the economies of both India and Pakistan. The subsequent decades saw efforts at rebuilding, but the scars of economic upheaval endured. The partition left a lasting legacy of diplomatic strains and geopolitical tensions between India and Pakistan. The bitterness and mistrust created during those turbulent times still continues to influence diplomatic relations and the stability of the region. Through acknowledging the past, we pave the way for a more harmonious future. Civil society initiatives, people-to-people dialogues, and cultural exchanges have played a crucial role in bridging the gaps created by the partition. In the end, the Radcliffe Line, something that was intended as a practical solution, left a legacy of tensions, mass migrations, death, and deep-rooted divisions, simply from a lack of care, understanding, and consideration. It is estimated that between 1947 and 1951, that 1.3 million Muslims who left Western India never reached Pakistan. The corresponding number of missing Hindus, Sikhs along the western border is estimated to be approximately 0.8 million. Almost 2.2 million people just disappeared. So there you have it, taking history out of the textbooks and bringing it to you in a way that's seriously thought-provoking. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay awesome.